All right, baby, here we go. Thanks everybody for coming. This is super informal, so if you want to interject, ask questions, whatever, like pipe up. This is not like, I'm not a professor, I'm not anybody's teacher. I'm part of the community. I hope everyone did the reading. If not, it's like totally fine.
No, professor.
Yeah.
So sorry.
So I hope you did your homework. But it is like in our library, we're just revamping the website right now, but the link still works in the Instagram bio. Okay, so the first time that I read this several years ago, it really like was a perspective shift for me. A lot of the stuff in here is kind of like obvious and but it reframes how you think about soil and potting mediums from like the way that there was like the popular discourse around it and like your kind of like childlike understanding of like what dirt is. So that's basically the way that I want to kick things off today, but if people want to talk about different parts of this or focus or ask questions, that's cool. I have a few pages that we'll see highlighted about things that I think are important and interesting. And then some members of our club submitted some recipes, so we'll talk about that too. And then we have a little plant swap. So here we go. Stone eaters, very cool. Yeah, so did people read this? Because this guy's writing style is like so sick. I actually, this is my favorite sort of combination of things, like academic and also like a little bit bitchy and snarky. It's like very right up my alley.
Georgiana was saying that she read it in the original Romanian.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it's
How was
probably,
it?
and it's probably much more snarky
Spicier?
and bitchy than you think.
That's great. Okay, so why is it so important to cacti, this feature in regards to the soil mixture? So this is talking about, you know, they're like, in your indoor collection or in your potted collection, there are very few things that your plant interacts with, right? There's like ambient temperature, humidity, light, and potting medium. And since the roots don't have free reign to go wherever they want and they're not in their natural habitat, like the potting medium is exceedingly important. And so just acknowledging that and understanding that you have, that's the thing that you have control over the most, right? You can buy grow lights and all of that sort of stuff, but you're choosing exactly what goes into your mix or what mix you buy. And just acknowledging that, I think, is like a very big thing, and how your plant is going to grow as a result of that. And it's such a large part of the equation in having a healthy and happy plant. So this is the kind of stuff. So the roots are the most important organ of the cactus, which is, again, something that's like is obvious, but you take for granted because you're not looking at them, right? So I think that's another reason why I found this reading the first time I went through it to be like so obvious, but also like so important, because when something is out of sight, it's definitely out of mind. Yeah. What things jumped out to people when they were reading first? Was it when the laws started, or did people find other points before that to be of interest?
I mean, I just remember we switched to almost 100% mineral after reading it for a few months, and then we went back to something more moderate. But it was very convincing. So.
Yeah, he definitely speaks and writes emphatically, but then he's like, yeah, you know, but that's just kind of like what I do. It's a lot of hedging.
It takes a lot of digging before you get to his mixture, and he's pretty evasive about what his mixture is. If you read closely.
Yeah, and
he never explicitly says it, but there's a few different sections if you piece it together.
And like something that is important that he buries the lead too is that he's planting this shit like in the ground. Like obviously he's got a huge trench that he's dug, but it's not, they're not in pots. Like he's like recreated the natural environment. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later, but with like a deep hole, and then large boulders, and then smaller rocks, and then it gets into the potting mixture, which is amazing and very cool. And trying to replicate that in like taller pots maybe, or bigger pots, makes sense. But I wish that was like talked about earlier on too. Yeah. So did people read this? Do you know the like these laws and definitions and whatnot?
The other
memorized.
I read it. Yeah.
The other thing that stood out to me is a quote that's basically saying that both cacti and us were just out of place in modern environments, no matter what you do. So funny. I was like, okay.
He's so good. Like I wish there was like a corresponding like poetry book or work of prose next to this.
Right.
Right. Okay. So always start with a mineral blend and then add organics as needed. Right. So I think that, like we kind of just touched on, that I think that makes the most sense. So what that means is inorganic, which would be like different minerals, so like rocks, pumice, perlite, that sort of stuff, akadama, manto, all of those sort of things, and then mixed in with like your organics like bark, humus, compost, all of those other organic mixtures. Can somebody open the door, please? Hey.
Hey.
So like the amount of organic materials that you combine into your potting mixture, there's like a few things that it should correlate to. It should correlate to like what the plant is, right? So if the plant is a cactus, a succulent, a caudix-forming tree, a vining plant, all of those sort of things will help you choose like the amount of mineral items and then the amount of organic items, and then like the sizes of those things based upon like the age of the plant, the size of the roots. So the environment that it comes from, your particular plant, will help inform these things, along with how much light you're giving it. So do you have grow lights? Is this outside? Is this in a shade house? And then how much you want to water. So how much you want to water, it seems like, hey, thank you, Kara. It seems kind of like that should be like a hard rule that you water this much, and people often will ask you, how much should I water this plant? And like, it is like a much more flexible thing, because what your potting mixture will determine like how long the moisture is held inside of it, and then how long your plant has to absorb the moisture that's being held. So if you have a more mineral rich and organic poor potting soil, whatever you want to call it, you'll have to water more and more often. And there are benefits and difficulties that arise based upon your potting medium. I know that's kind of like a lot, and I was a little bit long-winded and winding, but does that make sense? And do people have questions about that?
So, like, that's what I feel like, where it's, you know, you read the text or you listen to stuff from people, but like, yeah, you kind of have to just see what works in your own space, because it's like he's saying, I mean, you can control the soil, but then if you can't control like the sunlight or the things you're getting, because then someone might say, oh, like, well, if we're talking about what happens in the environment, like, are they getting water like every few days in the environment, like you know, it's like maybe they don't, maybe it's like you don't get water for like months and then there's like rain or something, right? But it definitely makes sense to me, like, as in you have minerals, and you know, like the more organic stuff just holds on to water more. And even within minerals, I think he talks about like there's water retention is like different between like different minerals.
Yeah.
So
the porosity of them.
Yeah,
the
porosity,
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like the thing, which I'm sure he does talk about, like also the size of like the things that you get, because like you know, if you buy like very, very coarse pumice versus like, yeah, something like decomposed granite, or you just, you know, I don't know, like hit this pumice with like a hammer to break it down, it can really make a difference, like you said, depending on how big your plant is, what the size of the roots are, so.
Yeah, so I think that the size of the particles you use should change with the size of the plant.
Yeah.
Most of my stuff that I pot, there's like a standard mix, which has like my standard sizes, and the only time I really deviate from that is like if it's seedlings, and that will all be like fines or sifted or the smallest particles that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I have like a large pot or a large plant, then I'll end up using like either like rocks that I don't like anymore that I don't want to use for top dressing, I'll mix into the potting material, or I'll use like broken terracotta. So I did bring stuff that I use in my mix that if people want to see, like broken terracotta here, and then all of these other things that are labeled. You can like pass them around and look at them. You can open the film canisters. And you know, like he kicks it off by talking about like in habitat, cactus are living in almost an exclusively mineral substrate. And not only does that influence, like, again, moisture retention and moisture release, but these, like, symbiotic relationships of, like, bacteria, mycorrhiza, fungi, all of that sort of stuff with the root systems to decompose and, like, digest the minerals that are existing in their environment. So he's really, like, drilling down that not only does the biome exist above the level of soil, but like it's very important what's happening within the soil as well. So that's why I use mycorrhiza. You want to make sure that you're using mycorrhiza that has a beneficial relationship for the plant that you're using it with. So the two main categories are endo and exo.
Yeah, but like only like 80% of plants use
endo.
Endo, yeah.
Which and like the mycorrhiza I use Bigfoot, it has a mix of both, so you're covered.
I think it's only certain trees have a relationship with exos.
It's the finest, yeah.
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that? The
Mycorrhiza, there's endo and exo, and most, like Sean said, the vast majority of cactus and succulent plants use endo. Whatever, I can't remember the second part of that phrase, but like the endo mycorrhiza to create a relationship with their roots to digest the minerals in the potting medium.
And what is the difference between the two?
I don't know precisely what the difference is, I just know that those are the two main ones.
I think endo refers, it goes into the roots, and exo is it lives on top of the roots or something like that. Okay. I think it's like inside outside.
Okay.
But it's really, yeah, I think it's like only trees have, only like a bunch of tree families use exo.
What kind of brands have we found with mycorrhiza? Do they have research supporting
brands?
Yeah, I use like Bigfoot just because like that's what I was introduced to. But there are a bunch of different brands.
I think mycorrhiza came from it's really great for rooting but it came from growing weed. I think a lot of the research behind it came from growing weed. I like to use a slow release pebble. It's like kind of it's like more in line with using like mineral soil because it looks like rocks. It's not a dust. You can get it in a dust form or you can get it in pellets.
What's the what's like the bacteria compost? It's a Japanese thing. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Bokashi?
Yeah, bokashi. Is that similar? Because that's like a mycorrhiza like forming. People will add that to.
Yeah, I don't know precisely if it's the same, but it's creating like that living soil.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's not only like the roots creating a relationship with that, but it's also like fostering other bacteria and other things that are helping to contribute to like it not being inert, it being active, and it allowing for nutrients to be like exchanged and shared.
Can I say one more thing about
Yeah.
mycorrhiza? I also had azomite because azomite feeds the mycorrhiza.
Yeah.
And it's like a micronutrient powder that apparently like the mycorrhiza feeds off of more quickly. So you keep it alive and it'll like flourish more in your soil than if you just put it dry into your soil. It's gonna take a lot of time to like break down all the mineral rocks in the soil. So I use azomite.
Where do you get
Somebody
that?
does. Azomite is very available. Like a lot of farmers use it.
Okay.
It's very available. Yeah, you can find it anywhere.
Cool.
Cool. So well draining, this is like something that you hear a lot across like all of the, that's like one of the first things people talk about when they talk about soil for cactus and succulents, like making sure that it drains well. And like he talks about here, what that means is like for the capacity, like its capacity of water to pass through it easily. So like regardless of whether it consists exclusively of mineral components or exclusively of organic components, like its ability to drain isn't based solely on what is inside of it. It's based on like the size of the particles and the array of particles and components that are inside of it. So you can have like a very organic potting mix that is also well draining based upon mixing in other inorganic things and the actual organic stuff that you're using. Yeah, and that's the second law in there too. So that's why you hear people talking about things like pumice and perlite and those other like porous things that create spaces and allow for water to pass through them, as well as not just creating space because of the particles or the particle size. He talks about that a lot too with other minerals. There's like pages and pages of the different minerals he suggests using, and a lot of that is like not available to us in New York, and that like that's a whole nother thing. Is like this is like the information here is like even it's more applicable to people who like live in desert or xeric environments, because a lot of these minerals are naturally occurring there, and you can get them at whatever store that you drive your car to. If you if you live in New York, you're kind of limited to stuff that you can get in person, which is like not that many items listed out here, and then order online, and then shipping of those things becomes cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So figuring out balancing what components make a good potting mix for you, and then what components you can cost effectively get. That's how I determine like what I make my mix out of. This is something that's very cool, and is like a super easy takeaway. So both of these Turbini carpus lopharoides were growing on like a saline soil, and he talks about, he's like, don't do this, don't do that, but you could do this and you could do that. What you need to know when you're looking at this is like these are two of the same plants that are the same age, but they were planted in two different soil types. Like one, the saline soil is like more of like a growth inhibitor and more of like a typical soil, and you can see like how different this is, right? So the ones in the back are grown in the more saline soil, which has more of like a hard grown or habitat look, and then the plants in front are grown in like a more typical mix. One isn't better than the other, and it's just kind of like what you can afford and like what you can tolerate, and it's aesthetic. And then he has like a very long section in here about aesthetics, which I think is funny. But
I mean,
everything is subjective.
I think especially for Turbini carpus, this look of the plants in the front, that's very unnatural. Like,
Yeah.
I do like plump plants, but it doesn't. In my opinion, that doesn't look good. I agree. Like,
Yeah.
does not look natural.
You can also achieve this maybe to a lesser extent with like withholding water or increasing light. So again, like this is like an equation of what your desired outcome is and like how you can support that, and then you change these components or these features to achieve that.
So is a consequence of the normal soil that like the plant can hold more water because it has more mass at that point? Like, is that?
So what I think he's trying to communicate here is like saline has a detrimental effect to like the root's ability to draw out moisture, so it creates a more vigorous root system, I think, which allows it to absorb more water.
Oh, okay. So the ones that are deflated could actually, or more representative of the
Of the
natural
plant
growth.
habitat.
They could take more water because the roots are more vigorous.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what exactly the mechanism is that is like causing this. I would say like a more easily understood and easily actionable thing is more light, less water, and more intense light, not just like windowsill. Like if you wanted your plants to look like these plants in back, and you wanted to maintain a same potting medium, I would say just like you need more intense UV. And maybe you use a smaller pot too. Like that's another way to achieve more habitat, hard-grown looking plants, is like giving them less space. And so they have a smaller root system, and so like as a result they can't digest as much of like the mineral content or absorb as much of the water.
I think it's all of those things you said, but I think it's also just length of time that the soil is holding water for. The plant has access to water, right, for way
but
longer.
Even if it's the same thing, like this soil, he doesn't say exactly. He uses general signifiers here. The soil could be the same, but then have like whatever dazomite or whatever mineral component that has a saline feature to it, and just because of that added salt in the potting mix, the roots don't do something.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? Because like you could say like the salt having the presence of salt, like so water moves from high concentration to low, right?
Yeah.
So meaning on a micro scale, you could say that maybe the water tends to go to where the salt is, and there's less of it, like quote unquote, available for roots immediately or like trapped there. It could also be changing like the pH of the soil from
totally.
like now when water reacts with salt, you have like byproducts, and like this could change. I mean, but like right, like at the end of the day, like most people are like, okay, don't have salt because like like maybe this kind of thing will happen to you. But if that's kind of the look you want, maybe it turns out that where that turbinicarpus grows, if you were to calculate whatever, like that's just what the soil is there. But then I think it's, if you want to experiment, like you also need to have like more of that certain type of plant. So the risk is like saying, okay, if you only have that one plant and you're like, let me decide to like turn it into this, like you might kill the plant if you go full steam ahead on one thing. But like you can experiment with like groups of seedlings maybe if you want to see something.
But I've seen on Instagram people in California that have some that look just like the two in the front, basically very chunky. So that, I don't know.
What he mentions here with the salinity, he also mentions it when talking about limestone, is that when we look at plants in habitat, what we're seeing is plants that are growing in the presence of natural growth inhibitors like limestone or saline. And if you grow them in what we're calling like a regular mix that's not saline, you're seeing what the plant would do if it were growing in an environment that didn't have those growth inhibitors. But it's the natural ways to be in the presence of those.
Like they only tolerate those things. They don't they don't need it. They just
right.
Tolerate
it could be an ideal water for cacti might be slightly acidic, but with limestone it makes it alkaline, so they don't grow as productively as if they had their ideal things. But what we associate, like it might look better if they have that slightly alkaline soil because that's what they look like in nature.
Or like right, or it's they've adapted to handle it. So it's like if you went and like you're looking for these plants, you're not going to see like super lush vegetation all around and then the plants. You're going to see like thorn scrub or like, you know, plants that can also tolerate this type of growth inhibition, and they also can. So I mean, yeah, a lot of it is how attuned are you to like the look of plants and habitat, or do you know, if you think the one in front looks super cool because it's like a huge like snowball, then go for it. Like, and I see dried flower buds at the top of the plant in the front left, and also the one like in the back right. So like, at least from that perspective, they're both like doing their thing, right? So yeah.
So with respect to increasing the salt content, do they say which minerals have more salt or have salt at all? Do they
in the listing of the like those like dozen or so pages?
Okay,
he's
discussing that.
I think he said also like sometimes just harvesting sand from a more coastal region
Right.
produces
Naturally.
saline
Right.
moisture, which
Right.
unless you're experimenting, he does not recommend doing because then you have like other factors.
You might also have like
Then you need to maybe change how much you water, or you know.
Right.
Yeah.
a large concentration of microplastics,
Yeah.
human waste in the sand.
I've been using 100% microplastic soil.
Macro, I think it's macroplastic.
Yeah.
I think stuff like this is the most helpful, like generally in this reading, where he's like, okay, crushed rock should have a weight of 60 to 70% of the total mineral component. A mix of other ingredients can occupy 30 to 40%, X, Y, and Z, keeping da-da-da-da-da, and then organic material should be about 20%. Like, these kind of things are like great starting points when you're beginning to make your own potting soil, and then like experimenting and deviating based upon like, again, like plant type, plant age, and then desired effect. Okay, and then this part is talking about transplanting. I sort of disagree with his general idea of transplanting plants in the height of their dormancy, which he says.
Yeah, I disagree also.
Yeah, he says to do that. So these I'm paraphrasing, but his words are like, when the plant isn't doing anything, it's not going to notice being transplanted, and it has less likelihood of reacting adversely. I disagree. I think that you should this is for more mature plants also, not seedlings. I think that you should transplant your more mature plants just before spring, so they are not technically actively growing, but they are about to be. So you will know more quickly if you have a problem, and they are like getting ready to be like their most vigorous. So they'll start to be reproducing their root system and like actively growing. And so I think that they have the greatest likelihood of like surviving and thriving being transplanted right before that happens. I don't know if people think differently, or
I've had pretty good success with that, where like, say I'm not watering over the winter, sometimes at all, and I know my first water is going to be in March, I'll transplant like 2 weeks before I want to give them their first drink of the year. I think the kind of general consensus is like, don't water for a week or two after transplanting to let any damaged roots kind of callus over before introducing moisture. So I just pick 2 weeks and repot stuff 2 weeks before they're going to get their first water, and then I haven't had any issues with that.
yeah, I think that sounds good to me.
I have a maybe tangential question, but like, how when you're dealing with like mineral soil, I'm sure it varies based on the components you're using, but like, how like reusable is the soil? Like, how long does it actually take to break down to a point where you don't want to like use it?
Well,
Or you need to like you need to amend it with something, I guess. Like,
if I'm repotting something, it's for like one of a couple of reasons. One, like the worst reason being that it's fucked up because of like insects, pests, fungal, whatever. So if that's the case, I'm composting that. I'm not using it. But if it's like just going bigger or into something more aesthetic, I will reuse at least some of it because like I have hopefully already created an active potting medium. So there's like already whatever microbes and things happening in there. So you want to like, that's what the roots are already used to. So you want to reintroduce that into your new pot. This is me saying this. This isn't like a law or anything.
Yeah.
But like
You
I
want
want
to use a little bit of the previous mix to get it like kombucha.
Yeah.
Like a sourdough starter.
I was just thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
What to build off of that? What is there? Do you have like kind of like a rule of thumb as far as like ratio goes of like your like old soil and then like new medium or like the previous?
If it's going into something bigger, then you probably can use all of it.
Okay.
But like you also, from my understanding and my thoughts, you want to have like new stuff that isn't compacted or isn't broken down or isn't X, Y, and Z.
When you repot, do you like loosen up the root a little bit just so?
Depends on the plant, and so like I will like refresh my mind. Like, is this plant like particularly sensitive? Are these roots dead? If the roots are dead, then I'm gonna trim it. I'm gonna trim off the dead stuff, especially for like Diosphorea. When I'm repotting them, like you'll see like all the roots are dead or like whatever, you know, like that's just what happens.
Yeah.
So I'll cut all of that, or else you'll have like this like skeleton, however deep the pot it was in before, like obstructing the repotting of it. Sometimes I'm just gonna trim the roots and put it back in the same pot, which is kind of like a bonsai sort of thing too, right? But yeah, and it's also if it's like a seedling, I don't know, like some plants will appreciate root pruning. Again, like do a quick Google or flip through your books or whatever to be sure that that's chill or like that's a good idea. But some things I'm just nervous about because of their age or how expensive they are. So like I'm not gonna play around with that. Or if the roots are like really crazy. If you use a mineral-based potting medium, the soil should like fall away from most of the roots.
Yeah.
And so you just put it back and carefully chopstick your potting medium back around your root system, and you're good to go. If you bought something somewhere else and the potting medium is like super compressed, I'll 50-50 like just put that like fucked up compressed stuff back in a bigger pot and with like better potting medium around it. So, excuse me, that the roots aren't being even more traumatized, or like I'm not giving the opportunity for introducing fungus or rot or anything. But if it's like something that's like younger, I'm like, I'm just gonna cut all this shit off. Like this is terrible, and then I'll roll the dice on it.
Gotcha. So it's like case by case.
It's case by case. It's also like what my mood is, I guess. Am I feeling spicy? Am I feeling scared?
I mean, if you like take notes, you know, like did it work that time? Then okay, maybe you can go back to it. Just going back to the very first part, I mean, I feel like I agree. I would say for like very small seedlings, like less than 1 year, if you need to repot them, I actually like to do it when I see that they're growing. Like they're just, because like you would think that in the wild it's like these like, or not in the wild, but like the seedlings don't have the most developed root system anyway. So like chances are in nature, whatever, there's like, you know, just an animal walking through can like potentially disrupt them, and they have to be able to like bounce back. But like seedlings are the most susceptible to dehydration. So like one thing is that like in the dead of winter, if your plant is really dehydrated, I feel like if you try moving it, it might not even have like the stores to like help it like reestablish that, okay, you're now in a
But
safe
that one should be dead anyway.
Yeah. I mean that too. But so for like transplanting like very small things like in spring, like or like coming to the, you know, transition between summer and fall is like, it's like a good time because like they'll still have a couple leeks to like clean themselves, and then you can stop it. Yeah.
I thought that these diagrams were so good, and I wish there was more of this stuff. Because you see, like, this teeny weeny geophytic Blasfeldia, right? So, like, there's so little plant tissue above the soil level, and it has these, like, very taprooty, succulent root system with not that many feeder roots. Like, you can see, it doesn't look like he trimmed anything. I mean, he probably trimmed some of these, like, fine roots, but like you can see, I'm sure you just like tipped the pot over and like kind of wiggled it out and it just like came out. But it's great that you see he's like doing this like river rock type stuff at the bottom to, I don't know, people go back and forth on like whether this is necessary or not. I have a tendency to think so, especially if you let water sit in the bottom of your thing, then it's gonna act like as a way like to attract root growth down towards it, especially for my Welwitschia, I always have them sitting in water. Almost always there's water in the bottom of... So I have like... If you have a rocket pot and then your Welwitschia gets bigger, what I do is like either cut like bigger holes into the bottom of it and just put more soil in another rocket pot and then stack it and then fill like the edge with Shonen Akadama to just like keep it from like moving back and forth. And then I have like my partner really likes this fancy yogurt, and like they like it comes in like a nice terracotta thing, and I just have water sitting in the bottom of that because like naturally in habitat like Welwitschia's root systems are so long because they're reaching down to aquifers to get their water. So like that is like an easy way to reproduce that in your house.
There's like there can't be much like in habitat there can't be much oxygen
that
far down. So it's like the anaerobic shit shouldn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's worked for like the last few years. I would say that like my wells have grown much more than before I was doing that. So that's why I think these rocks at the bottom could have like a similar kind of thing. It also just like makes another texture for the root system, and I think that they want, like he talks about so often, like a heterogeneous mix. This is just like another component of that. And boom, look at, he's doing like Tadayoshi before Tadayoshi was Tadayoshiing. I think this looks great. This is like another kind of practice that you see in alpine gardens. You have like a slot garden, right? This in habitat like would funnel moisture towards the root system. It also creates places for the roots to like hit and then grow down. It's creating like not only like an aesthetic thing, but a practical planting method as well. I think it looks great too. Okay, so this is cool. So you have, oh sorry, Rose rereading it. You have this, which is like the naturalistic way of achieving beneficial planting and like something that's aesthetic. Then you have like the kind of like hack fucked up way, like that's just function and not very aesthetic. So having the plant in a smaller plastic thing and then putting a bigger container on the the plant goes in the small one, and then like there's like the bottom is cut out, so it's like creating this like smaller environment, which a lot of root systems like, but then you plant that inside of a larger container for the roots to like expand towards and find more moisture and to grow larger. So you oftentimes hear people saying like, don't overpot your plant. This is like a very funny way of like elucidating that principle. And this is like so cool too, I think. Really strange.
So it like artificially like creates stress for
Yeah.
it to grow out, and then you give it that space.
It's like creating a slot garden, but with
It's the same thing that
shitty
you're kind of
plastic.
doing with like
Yeah.
your Welwitschia almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
And this is like an ornato. So cool.
That's interesting.
He's really like, trying some stuff.
that reminds me of like there's like a bonsai technique also that's like where you like when you trim all the roots, obviously bonsai, like they try to get all the roots like flat as possible,
Yeah.
kind of, like they try to get them to flare down. and then like there's a technique to where you just put like a tile, like you have a pot, a full depth pot, but then you put a big tile directly beneath it, with only like above the tile there's only like 2 or however many inches of soil, but then there's like under the tile there's like
more.
There's more. There's like as much as
for the feeder roots.
Yeah, and so like it forces the root system to grow out to the side and then down, and then when they repot, a lot of the roots that go under the tile get trimmed off.
They're
like
just
every
fine,
and like
cool.
it just is to force like a shape and like a root structure. It's I don't know that much about it, but
I don't know. It sounds like a lot.
Yeah, and then this is just talking about what was happening previously. Okay, so now, was there anything else that people wanted to talk about in the reading? Like, if you did read it, you should go look through the section that has all of the materials. It's really impressive. I think it starts on page 20, and it goes until page 30-something. So he just talks about all of the different mineral components, what they do, and organic components, what they do, and then the sizes he recommends to use. So like that's really helpful too if you want to like deep dive and do like a little research to see, what you want to experiment with. Any things that we want to talk about before we talk about our recipes? No?
I just say the last thing about this is like, if it's a plant that you get a sense is, I don't know, doing well, like so one thing about repotting is that you get to like inspect the roots of the plant, right? To see like how is it looking? Like and over time, like if you get used to your mix and you see good results all the time, like that's good, but if sometimes you might notice like a plant is not doing so good, and then like you said, the health starts with the root system. So you might be like, I took it out and I saw that the roots are like in this are not good, and maybe like I'll take a note of whatever, like what if I noticed anything else like about this soil, like it was too moist, like there wasn't enough drainage, but like so the thing with like just saying like as a rather than a blanket like like try the small pot method, like sometimes like when like people were talking about do you disturb the roots or not, and I mean sometimes like clearing out the soil is just helping you to see if like if there are mealy bugs or like other kind of things that are there. So like just as practice, but once like if you've had a plant in your possession for a while and you figure like it's doing good, then probably when you repot you don't have to worry as much about it. But that's like one of the sort of like housekeeping, I guess, like
benefits. And if you want to see like how your root system is doing and you don't want to unpot, just like wiggle your plant. If your plant is like secure, then you probably have like a great root system, and if it's not, like probably something going wrong, and you should probably unpot it and take a look-see. Okay, so this picture is a little out of date, but you get the idea for the most part. So the base set I use is typically Stone Eaters from Cactus Store or Bonsai Jack. That's like the top component here. You see like this heterogeneous mixture. I think it's like Monto, bark, pumice, mycorrhiza, and granite, right? Am I missing anything?
From Stone Eaters or Bonsai Jack?
Bonsai.
Bonsai Jack is 4 things.
Yeah.
It's the shale or whatever.
Shale, that's what it was.
There's like bark in there too?
Yeah.
Bark, yeah.
So what is shonen akadami?
It's not fines. It's like it would be called pumice fines. It's just like under. It's like a 1/16 of an inch or something.
What is academic exact? It's like a clay.
Clay,
right?
calcinite clay or whatever, fired clay.
I thought it wasn't calcined.
And I think it's just fired. I can't remember. Too many minerals I read about the last 4 days. I like this because it's very small, but
Right.
it's not sand. So it's just like another step down
Right.
or up, whatever direction you're going.
So would you say it's like the same size as what's in this bag?
I think maybe
little
it's
smaller.
touch smaller, yeah.
Okay.
It's also sometimes it's hard to get.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
So then, for a matte opal suggestion, I use sandy loam in most stuff now. That's just like your typical organic soil with like a healthy amount of sand, and like that naturally occurs, or you could buy a mixed version. But this is like a thing that gets like prohibitively expensive. Unless you get somebody who's like
Do
sending
you dig it up or do you
flat
buy
rate.
it?
It depends. Depends like if I'm visiting my parents or if I need it to start. I use it a lot for starting seeds too. And then sharp sand, which is just like you can get contracting sand from like a hardware store, and it's like $5 for a big bag, and it's just not. It's not like beach sand. It's not tumbled. It has like, it's sharp. So you want that because it creates more of like a beneficial shape and whatnot for roots to grow and lock onto, and for it to help with drainage.
This is not the same thing as play sand.
No, play sand is like washed and like tumbled. It's whatever not I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
More easily
Yeah.
compactable.
Yeah. There's usually some kind of crazy chemicals and shit too, like he talks about often in this. And then 1/8 inch pumice, like, or I'll get like a mixed like bag of different sizes depending upon like what the potting mix is, but I usually add more pumice than comes in stone eaters or bonsai jack. And then if I'm using bonsai jack, I'll add mycorrhiza. If I'm using stone eaters, I won't because it's already in there. And then perlite, usually like a bigger grain, so again there's like more of a heterogeneousness to it. And then compost. So compost I get from the LES Ecology Center, and that's kind of like, it acts like a slow release fertilizer because of like the worm castings and all of like that super beneficial organic stuff, and then you know bioactive living, you know, you want to create like a live soil, and compost has a lot of the stuff that helps to foster that. And then X, Y, and Z depending, like I talked about earlier with like the broken terracotta or bigger rocks if it's like a big plant. Questions, or should we keep trucking?
Yeah, with the compost, if it's just straight up worm castings, how does that affect, like, I mean, do you just, or is that fine? Or
This compost is like not just worm casting.
Yeah.
But I use like not very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel. I mean, it's just like one thing is that a lot of times you hear people say like, "Oh, I use pure mineral, but to compensate, I fertilize it more."
Yeah.
Which kind of defeats like the whole
The
purpose of
purpose.
like saying that the plant can live off of like decomposing the rock. So again, it's kind of like. Just keep in mind that if you like like maybe what they're saying is they're not patient enough for it to like grow that slow like with the natural process. So yeah, people compensate by having like a bit more organic, and also if you don't want to like mix your water with like fertilizer like almost every single time.
Yeah.
So
These are some examples of plants that have grown in their root system. Shui is not here, but
Sorry, could you go back to the previous one? Nice. So, what's the thing on the left? The leftmost?
this is, I put it in here because the roots are so crazy. It's a myrmecodia, but this I like make like, you know, a subtropical type mix for that. So it's more like sphagnum moss and peat, and then I do use, like I'll use, like, if I have this already mixed, I'll put some of it into that to help it with drainage and help it have access to other minerals. But if not, then I'll just probably use like stone eaters or bonsai jack with like more typical tropical subtropical mix. So Shuei for Haworthia, she just uses Boon, and then for everything else, it's like 50% Quar, pumice, perlite, expanded shale, and then other bibs and bobs depending. I think that's like pretty standard for a lot of people too. It's like mineral-y, but still has like a fair organic component, so you have to water less, and you'll have plumper plants.
Do you have an opinion about Quar?
I don't particularly like it. I think like oftentimes it's like, you know, you have like, it's like dust and then like huge pieces of shit.
Yeah.
It contains more salt, right? Because it's coconut.
Yeah.
You have to rinse it.
Yeah.
I use it like if I have it on hand or somebody gives it, or like it's crazy, like you'll see people just leave bags of potting soil on the street that like for whatever reason like I quit plants or something and I'll grab it. But I'm not like actively seeking it. Pipe up.
We grew up pretty organic. You lose some things to like rot, but you also don't lose like a lot of things. I should have actually, when you were saying pictures, I was like, at first I was like, wait, like of the soil, like how is that going to be like that much of an illustration? But recently, so I'll pass the phone around. Like I had two like sets of things. Like the one on the left was like a lot more mineral, and the one on the right has like more organic. I mean, I honestly I didn't see like a ton of difference with regards to like the root system, but
you're also growing mostly baby plants.
Seedlings,
yes,
that's true,
yes,
that's true.
yes.
And for mature plants these days, we would definitely put more mineral, I would say, than that. That's kind of our seedling recipe.
I would say like for me too, I think I use more mineral for my seedlings than you, but like I definitely use more organic for those younger plants.
Right, and
because like you said, they have less storage.
Yeah.
And so like if it gets really hot one day, or you just like get busy and you don't water your stuff, the likelihood of it being detrimentally impacted is decreased because of the increase in organic material.
Yeah, so like as we like continue up potting, I feel like I'll try to put more of the mineral stuff in, you know, like in for like larger plants, but yeah, for instance, like just starting seedlings, it's literally just microwave Miracle Grow with water.
Right.
Like there's
Like
to basically like kind of like as a disinfectant, because sometimes like you find like garbage like in the Miracle Grow, and like so it's just like an extra kind of thing, like microwave soil. I mean, like, you know, there is a chance that it doesn't happen, but like, you know, nothing is worse than like you're excited about these seedlings and then you realize like there's fungus like just growing inside of it, and so I feel so far the microwaving has reduced the incidence of that happening, and then we like we really seal it in, you know, those takeout containers where like the lid just like locks, so also you're not getting a lot of like outside air contamination. It's like we have a cat at home, like, you know, it's like he might just be like rubbing litter, yeah, exactly, or like cat hair, like whatever. So pretty much that's just what we do.
Yeah, that's very good.
For seedlings, I should have made a page for this, but I was rushing and I was a little hungover this morning, so yeah. For seedlings, I'll do like sandy loam, the Shonen Akadama, sharp sand, vermiculite.
Oh, vermiculite.
And then like whatever organic component, like so a potting mix, whatever is like on hand, and then maybe a little compost if I have that too.
Right, but in terms of mineral, when we decided to add more minerals, actually in that article we saw that granite, like when he goes into describing all the different types, so we saw that granite is one of the ones that he recommends the most, and it's readily available. Like you can buy it in, I think we bought 40-pound bags, originally for topping because it comes in all kinds of colors. But then we realized, okay, this is actually great to use inside as well. So I started using that quite a bit, and yeah, we like it so far.
Granite?
Yeah.
Granite, yeah.
Like the
Like so,
decomposed
right. So
granite.
the two pictures in the middle with like what looks kind of like sand or like the red. Like apparently those were both granite. It's just different
Oxidation.
colors. Yeah, oxidation. But like the decompose is like with the red one you can physically just squeeze like the bigger things and it will start to like crumble. So so especially for smaller roots, those
Right,
are like
right.
are good, and then like Zach said, as you go up, you know, like you can add more, like, but
Right. And it's pretty heterogeneous in size actually. A few of them they really vary from a bit of dust to bigger rocks. So
it's like areocarbon.
Yeah. Johnny boy.
Yeah, I've gotten pretty. I wish I was more formulaic about my soil. Maybe I will be this year, but
For soil.
I use stone eaters or I use superfly bonsai.
Superfly.
I think I like superfly. It's essentially the same as bonsai jack. It's 4 ingredients that Zach mentioned before. It's pine bark, the shale,
Monto pumice. I
hummus,
feel like it's a smaller
and
particle
lava.
size, right?
It's a
Like,
smaller
bonsai
particle
jack
size
is a
and it's
larger
even.
Size.
Yeah, I just I use stone eaters or I use superfly, and then I kind of use like old soil sometimes because it doesn't have as much nutrients in it. Or it's like as long as it's like clean, and I'll microwave it if I need to. And then I use mycorrhiza and I use 2 slow release fertilizers. I use rock phosphate and I use maybe it's just azomite and rock phosphate.
Why rock
Yeah.
phosphate?
I just heard it was good for roots and it's like a slow release, like really light fertilizer. But I kind of like my plants, I really like change it, like kind of Zach was saying earlier, for like every plant and for every plant it's a little bit different. So if the pot is really small, I might do more organic, but that also really depends on what the plant is. You know, if I'm trying to grow something harder, I'll go like all mineral. If I'm, you know, something is like rooting, I might do like a layer of perlite and then put like a mineral soil underneath it. I'll like layer soils. I really like perlite for rooting stuff. I heard
Yeah.
a lot of Japanese growers use perlite because it's lighter, so when if you want to check if it's rooted yet, it doesn't break the roots as much.
Right.
Just 100% perlite.
Yeah, you can grow in 100% perlite. Some things I have it in 80% pumice. Some things I'm growing like 80% pumice and 20% soil. Like
water stuff and
Yeah.
100% perlite.
what?
How do you water stuff and
Yeah,
100%
wouldn't it just
perlite?
How do you
like without
water
it
it?
all just floating
Oh, I just-
away?
Oh, it holds. Yeah, I mean,
There was something in the back for a while that was growing in like 100% perlite.
oh yeah,
It was
that
rooting.
was rooting a pachypodium, but
Ah.
I will say like having a mineral soil like indoors, you have to water like 3 times a week. Like if it's a really small plant, like you can really screw up. Or if you go on vacation, you can kill a lot of plants from like the underwatering and then watering too much, like the roots die and then it's sitting in too much water, it can't like. So you have to be like really consistent about watering during the growing season at least. So I will say that's like a risk of all of this. So yeah, it's a little bit different. But I do all kinds of things and I wish I was a little bit more exact, but yeah, I don't know if it's a good thing I'm less exact or a bad thing. But I lose less and less plants each year, but attributing it to the soil is like, I don't know.
So the risk is higher with like younger plants, basically.
Risk is higher with younger plants, yeah. I kind of would like to just grow things either from seed or get really mature, like really old, like specimen plants. Buying things in the middle nowadays feels like not worth it to me. It's like too high that I might kill it, and yeah, it's like whatever.
Yeah, but like he talks about in the
Moving
reading
towards-
though, like the older the plant is, the more it's become accustomed to like the specificity of its
That's
treatment
true.
and care.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. That's why like growing stuff from seed has like a lower rate of loss when you're like
Right.
when you have it dialed in because it's just
They
it's
adjust
used to
to
what
yeah.
you're
what you're
giving it
doing,
from
and then-
once it's from when it was like a seedling.
And
Yeah.
right, and then but then also like I was gonna say like, the nursery cultivars like they're like not genetically like so like if so looking at the Turvinicarpus and like these other things that just grow out there, that's fine, but then stuff that only exists in like a Japanese person's greenhouse or like it's probably like not like actually I mean we have a friend who's experimenting with what happens when you like stick those things like out in the wild, but yeah, if you're getting like the like nursery specific plants, like probably you have like more leeway with the mixtures.
Yeah. This is Joe's pick. Bucky shits brown gold. Bonsai. I get this for this specific batch
Black
of
lava.
Doctor.
That's awesome.
Bonsai mix. Stun eaters, black lava, and potting soil,
Etc.
Etc. Yeah. Chili powder.
Secret ingredient.
Chili
powder.
etc. Great. That's me.
Hey.
Yeah, I realized that was a typo when I sent it to you. That's pumice, not perlite. So that's my bad.
No sweat. I'll change
And this is not
live?
done. We good.
Yeah.
That's not the ratio that I typically use. I just kind of put those things in there so that I can take a nice picture of them. I would say I tend to use less organic mix than we see like in this picture.
Okay.
For seedlings, I'll probably use 70 to 80% organic,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
for mature plants, it's maybe like 20%.
Got it.
After first reading the reading that we definitely all read today, a couple years ago, I did try and grow in just like pure mineral stuff, or I guess Superfly has some bark chips in it, but it's like
Right,
mostly
right. It's not gonna break down as
mineral, and
fast. Yeah.
some stuff did really good, but I also lost some stuff, so then slowly have been adding different amounts of organics back in with better success each year.
Right.
Yeah,
I just kind of do it by feel every time I'm repotting something. I
Yeah,
don't have a
same.
standard
I
mix. It's depending on how old the plant is, the size of the pot, whether it's plastic or terracotta,
Yeah.
all that
Also,
stuff.
growing succulents is like really different than growing cacti. Like I would recommend like mineral mixes for a lot of cacti, not everything, but
Yeah.
succulents like want way more organic material. Like
I don't
any
know.
Forbia. You can do whatever you want. It depends. It like depends. Like I try and like mimic the nurseries that I like, that I think grow successful plants. Like Dioscorea, I have a specific mix for Dioscorea that just is a ripoff from like multiple nurseries I saw doing the same thing, and I was like, I just do that. So
What's your
Dioscorea is like 1/3 cocoa chips,
Oh,
which is like used for reptiles
Mhm.
and stuff. Big pumice, like 1/4 inch, and then like compost or potting mix, whatever. And then I find like euphorbias grow really well in like basically 60% perlite and 40% normal potting soil, so I do that. my mineral mix is mostly for like South African plants and cacti. I do like heavy like mineral mixes. But I found like these two are growing so well and like really organic mixes, you know.
Yeah.
Like and now I want to go back to like certain things like astrophytum, like that are like thirsty
Right,
or
yeah.
cacti.
Yeah.
Like I think they would do much better. So I think, yeah, that's kind of why mine was like all over the place. Oh, I've been proven wrong so many times. Like minerals really only works for. Yeah, I don't think it's difficult. Zach does it for all of his plants, and it's a lot of maintenance. That's why one reason why I've veered away from doing mineral mixes in all of my plants. But yeah.
I don't remember where I saw this, but this is also for sale somewhere.
Oh.
But I thought this was like this soil looks pretty good to me, and like a really good base for most stuff.
It's harsh.
But I have to tell you, I hate perlite.
Yeah.
Also, don't breathe it in. It's very not good for you.
Sauce vermiculite, not good for you.
Oh yeah, vermiculite is supposed to be the worst one, I think.
So, but I think this looks pretty good.
Do you know why it's oh sorry, what were you gonna
Nothing.
say? What, do you know why it's bad for you?
It's like, isn't it like glass?
Yeah, it's fiberglass.
Just breathing in like glass.
It might be like the size of the finer
Yeah.
particles are the ones that really like get in
Thinking
there.
of the dust when you get a big bag. or
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
yeah.
You know, I had to wear my mask when I open up my.
That's it. That's all of them.
I've,
Thanks for coming.
There was
It's so
just like
funny.
a mix that you could get.
The soil. Like the moral of the story is that you're on your own.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Bye. Yeah, moral of the story is like do it yourself.
Yeah, do it. Like figure it out.
Whatever you feel
Like,
good.
whatever you
It's
think.
always the
I
right.
should have sent in a picture, but I have some a punch